Today we're going to look at replacing the plastic ties on an Ashford Rigid Heddle Loom versus upgrading to Texsolv and whether it's worth it. So I did a little bit of research. I watched a few videos and I've linked them in the description below so you can have a look yourself. But what I didn't like was that the holes weren't used for both the apron rod and the beams. And I really wanted to make sure that they were secure and I didn't have to worry about anything falling apart or shifting. I quite like Geebee's Handmade idea, but I was thinking that the tape on either side would end up getting grubby down the line, and I really just wanted a nice clean solution, so I came up with my own. These pegs are used for a floor loom with the Texsolv cord, usually for tie-up, and I thought I might give them a go and just see how they actually worked. The Texsolv cord is a super strong nylon cord that's got lots of little built-in holes in the cord. And I kind of played around with the pegs and the cord just a little bit to see what would work better. And I decided that the round topped peg called a straight peg, not the square topped peg called an anchor peg, would work better as the profile was a little bit smaller. I purchased these from Thread Collective here in Brisbane, but you can buy them from anywhere that sells weaving supplies. I also decided that I wanted to have plenty of room to move between the apron rod and the beam. So I doubled the length of the plastic pegs, and I thought that this would give me plenty of wriggle room and give me more control over how close the apron rod is to the beam and how close the apron rod is to the actual heddle. So once I had the link sorted, I cut directly in the middle of one of the openings, the little hole, so that each one would be exactly the same size, and it is 11 inches or 28 centimeters is the length that I did. Of course, you can do whatever length you feel is appropriate if you choose to do this. So before cutting any more Texsolv cord or the plastic ties off, I just wanted to try one and see how we went with the peg to secure it to the beam. The peg did stick out probably a lot more than I would have liked, so this made me think for a little while whether I wanted to continue. And then I thought, well, these will actually be covered with the knots with the cardboard tube anyway, so should just be fine. So I decided I was happy, so I went ahead and cut the rest of the links to convert all of the plastic apron ties to the Texsolv. And I'm doing this on my 60 centimeter or 24 inch heddle because this is the one I use most out of my three rigid heddle looms. I have a 40 centimeter samplet, a 60 centimeter, which is this one, and also an 80 centimeter, which is a 32 inch. So I went ahead, cut off all of the plastic ties. These are all at the end of their life anyway, and even if I chose to go back to the plastic ties, they are really, really cheap to buy again if I needed to. As I'm putting on this second cord, I realized that I was going to have to make sure that I put each one on the apron rod exactly the same way so that it would sit flat and have exactly the same length from the beam. Here is a closer look at what the Texsolv cord looks like and how big those holes are in the cord. You can actually buy Texsolv cord that have different sizes as well. I just got what I thought was the biggest one, or the one that had the biggest holes. Once I had all of the cords attached to the apron rod, I just made sure that they were all facing the same way and had all gone on exactly the same way as well. Then I grabbed all of the other pegs that I would need for this side so I could attach them to the beam. Then I threaded the Texsolv cord through the beam, popped the peg through that top hole of the cord, and then popped the peg into the hole on the beam. And this is what it looks like right now. Then when I pulled back the apron rod, they weren't all the same size. And I was thinking, oh my word, I've done something wrong and stuffed up somewhere. And then I realized that I was holding the apron rod like it had the plastic ties on it, like upright and flat. And then I realized also that the end was caught around the side. So once I realized that, and I actually held the apron rod horizontal, it was spot on perfect. It felt really secure. It felt like all of the cords were exactly the same length, and I was really happy. I then went on and did the other side of the loom, and then I realized that the holes on either side of the beam are different sizes. So the smaller holes were too small for the pegs to actually go through the top. So when you thread through the smaller hole, and then the bigger hole is where the peg goes if you were going to do this for yourself. So now let's give this new setup a bit of a test drive. First of all, I loved the fact that I could control how far away the apron rod is to the heddle with a lot more certainty. I also loved the fact that the apron rod sat flat and horizontal, not vertical. And this was especially evident when I wound on. The apron rod then also sat perfectly flat against the beam, and this just made everything so neat and tidy. And when I wound on, it just felt like it was a lot easier to wind on and nothing was going to shift, which was going to interfere with my tension. Here you can see where I have lashed on, and again the apron rod is sitting perfectly flat, and I've got that control over how far away it is from the heddle and the beam. More control than what I would have had with the plastic ties. But now you can see the pegs, you can see them bubbling up under the weaving. So I'm going to have to put my cardboard tube underneath the weaving but over the pegs, which I did, and that was absolutely fine. But my cardboard tube wasn't big enough to cover the pegs and also cover the knots. So what I did after I'd gotten the pegs covered, I also put another set of cardboard rolls around the knots. So that would be one disadvantage. You would need more coverage over the knots and the pegs. This was fine. At the end of the weaving though, I found that I hadn't covered the pegs on the back beam, and they actually poked through the brown paper. So that would mean I'm going to have to make sure that I cover those pegs with another set of cardboard tubes. So that may also be a disadvantage. So advantage is how far away that you can control the apron rod, and the apron rod sitting perfectly flat so that you've got a lot more control over how far it is from the heddle, how far it is from the beam, and your tension, which I think will be a really big advantage. Also at the end, if you're trying to get the most possible use out of each warp, it will help to minimize waste. A disadvantage is the pegs. You will need to cover them on the back beam and the front beam with a cardboard tube. If that's fine with you, then I would really recommend this upgrade. And as always, everything we do is a personal choice. So this is just one way of upgrading. And I've linked also the other videos that I watched for slightly different methods of doing the upgrade as well, so that you can have a look and make a choice from there. Thanks for watching as always. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again next week with the video for the table runner.